If the SAVE Act passes, I will be ineligible to vote. I will be disenfranchised. You see, I was born from a lineage of immigrants who arrived in this country without visas or green cards or really any official documentation whatsoever beyond the purchase of transportation. The first immigrant in my family who stepped onto the shores of this land was a man by the name of William Brewster. Now, you may not have heard of William Brewster, or maybe you have. For those of you who are not familiar with my ancestor, let me tell you just a little bit about William Brewster. William Brewster was one of the church elders who immigrated from Europe on the very first passenger voyage of a ship called the Mayflower. You may have heard of it. He was one of the first members of the church leadership of the original, the very first band of pilgrims who fled Europe and fled religious persecution in search of freedom and set foot on a place called Plymouth Rock where the foundations of a new nation were laid. He was one of the men that history recalls each year envisioned as he huddled around a shared table with his fellow pilgrims, sharing a meal of Thanksgiving together with a band of Native Americans who helped them survive the harsh winters for which they were unprepared. At least, that's one version of history. That's the official version of history. I am a direct descendant of the official version of United States history. And if the SAVE Act passes, I will be unable to prove my citizenship. I'm one of the millions of Americans who will be disenfranchised, not because I took my husband's name and that name is reflected on my driver's license, which is different than my birth certificate. That is a valid concern in and of itself. But no, it's much more complicated than that. I have a passport that's valid for a few more years that still has my maiden name on it. But here's the problem. I was born Connie R. My father died in a car accident when I was 6 weeks old, and my mother remarried and Dad adopted me when I was 5. My birth certificate was changed to reflect my dad's last name through the adoption. I was married in my mid-20s, and when that marriage ended after 17 years, I had the opportunity to take my original birth name once again. I had always been closer to my grandmother R than to anyone else in my life. Mom and Dad had both already passed away by that time, and reclaiming my grandmother's name and honoring that connection of love felt right and true to my identity. So my divorce decree states that my name is legally changed to Connie R, but my birth certificate still has my adopted name, my dad's name, the name that I was raised with. I am going to be disenfranchised and ineligible to vote under the SAVE Act, not because I'm illegal or fraudulent, but because my life was filled with love and family connections, and the strict interpretations of what's required to prove citizenship don't take into account situations such as mine.